Here we go, multiplying and dividing positives and negatives. Now today it's going to be important to not only learn the rules about multiplying and dividing positives and negatives, but to also make sure that we understand the difference between the rules for multiplying and dividing positives and negatives, and also adding and subtracting positives and negatives, because the rules are very different, and if you get them confused, you're going to have a bad time. So let's look at these rules. Number one, or just the notes, when multiplying and dividing, when we're doing these two operations. This is important. When it's these two operations, if the signs are the same, the answer is positive. And if the signs of the numbers you're multiplying or dividing, the signs of those two numbers are different, the answer is negative. So when we talk about the signs, we're talking about the positive and negative signs. So we're going to memorize those rules. If the signs are the same, it's positive, it's a good relationship. But if they're different, they don't get along, so it's a negative relationship. That's maybe one way to think about it. Now, it's important to remember these rules and to realize that they're different from addition and subtraction rules for integers or positives and negatives. But I also want to kind of give you a reason why do we have these rules. Why do these make sense? So you don't have to take these notes, but you do need to pay attention. So why does a positive and a positive equal a positive? So this is the first example. So I tried to draw up the example of 2 times 3. Well, if you have two groups of 3 positives, you have one group and two group of 3 positives. Well, it's easy to see that if you just count those up, you have 6, and they're all positive. So this answer would just be 6. And it's a positive 6, and that just is a little illustration to show you why. Number 2 is, what about a positive and a negative? Why is negative 4 divided by positive 2? Why is that answer a negative? And for this, we have to know that for division, we're splitting into groups. So if we're splitting into 2 groups, and we're wondering, when we divide into 2 groups, what is in each group? Well, we see that if we take negative 4, oh, that was annoying. If we take negative 4, and we divide those 4 negatives into 2 equal groups, how many are in each group? Oh, in each group we have 2 negatives. So that's kind of an illustration to show why a negative divided by a positive, if the signs are different, your answer is negative, because they have 2 negatives in each. And now this is probably the most confusing one, and you might not be satisfied with my explanation, but I'm just going to give it to you anyway. What about a negative and a negative? Why, if those signs are the same, they're both negative, why does our answer turn positive? So in this case, we have, similar to the first one, it's instead of 2 times 3, what about negative 2 times negative 3? Well, if you have, it'd be easier if we had 2 groups of negative 3, or if we had, the opposite of 2 groups of 3. That'd be one thing. But what we're going to try and do here is we're going to try and take this first negative sign and separate it and think, what if that just means the opposite of 2 groups of negative 3? So here we have 2 groups of negative 3. But what if we have this negative sign out front? So we have, what's the opposite of 2 groups of negative 3? Well, if we just had 2 groups of negative 3, we'd have negative 6. But what's the opposite of that? Well, what's the opposite of negative 6? It'd be positive 6. So a negative times a negative, or if the signs are both negative, we have a positive. I hope you are okay with that explanation. The important thing, though, is that you remember the rule. So I'm sorry, but that's the best I got for right now. Let's look at some examples. So number 1 is 15 and 4/10 times negative 9. So we have to first think about what's the sign of our answer. Well, the signs are different. We have a positive 15 and 4/10 and a negative 9. So the signs are different. If the signs are different, the answer is negative. And let's do this multiplication. 15 and 4/10 times, and we can say it's a negative 9. But 9 times 4 is 36. 9 times 5 is 45, plus 3 is 48. 9 times 1 is 9, plus 4 is 13. And overall, we have one decimal place in these two that we need to factor into our answer. So we'll put this decimal back in, so we have one decimal place in our answer. The answer is negative 138 and 6/10. Okay, example number 2. If the temperature has dropped, oh my goodness, has dropped a total of 18 degrees Celsius at a constant rate, so the same amount over the past 5 days. What was the change in temperature each day? So we know the change is negative 18 because it dropped, and it's been the same each of the past 5 days. What was it each day? So we're going to say, how can you change 18 degrees over 5 days? If we split up that total change, if we divide by 5, what's our answer going to be? So 5 goes into 18 3 times. That would be 15. Subtract, and we get 3. We want an exact answer, so I'm going to add a decimal place here and say, how many times does 5 go into 30? That's 6 times. Now, we know that we're dividing negative 18 by positive 5 days. So a negative divided by positive, the signs are different. We have a negative answer. So the temperature, that's how I remember it. The temperature, we won't say dropped, we'll say changed. Changed negative 3.6 degrees Celsius each day. So please make sure that's in red. You got to have it written down, and you also have to have written down these questions and at least a summary of the second. And I'll leave you with those two, and I'll see you soon.